Back in 2018, an online friend of mine told me he was working with someone on a fan-made Ratchet & Clank video game, and I initially requested to come up with ideas for weapons and gadgets. I soon found out that they were going to be minimalistic about it, making it with PlayStation 2 graphics and reusing assets from the PS2 R&Cs. That meant new weapon and gadget ideas for the most part would be pointless to contribute, so I asked if I could write the story instead, which my friend accepted. I came up with a premise, incorporating elements from the PS2 games, like combining the Solana and Bogon galaxies, adding Gadgetron and Megacorp into the mix, and featuring returning characters and factions like the Q-Force and the Thugs for Less. I also had to keep gameplay elements in mind, so I added the hoverboard for instance as a progression tool. My suggestion for how the hoverboard could work actually led to some discord between my friend and I. You see, I thought perhaps it could work not only as a hoverboard in races, but I also suggested it could replace the grind boots, having it work on the grind rails, but that apparently led to a point of contention. I was dismissed as the main rider at that point, and due to other disagreements between the developers on the project, they soon gave up the project entirely. Even though I felt unfairly treated and the project went nowhere, I still thought the story I came up with was pretty interesting. I therefore developed it over the years, not completing it mind you, but I've written enough to lay out a general synopsis of it. Since I'm quite passionate about it, I wanted to share the story with you guys, so that's why I've made this video. Keep in mind that most of the details in this story use already established assets from the PS2 R&C games, so there might not be a lot of originality here, but hopefully the writing helps alleviate that. I did also add some new things, and since I eventually didn't have to write it while worrying about constraints of a fan project anymore, I did go a little crazy with it as it progressed. This story is meant to be set between the events of Ratchet, Deadlocked and Tools of Destruction, and while I'm not claiming it to be canonical, I did try to keep it consistent with the lore. I do have some uncertainties in that regard, regarding one character in particular, but hopefully it doesn't detract too much. R&C is no stranger to retcons anyway, so it might slide. With all that background information explained, it's time for me to go over my R&C fanfiction set between Deadlocked and Tools of Destruction. And I'll illustrate locations, characters, devices and such with images as I go along. I'm sorry to say, but I'm no good with pencils. After having put an end to Gleeman Vox's illegal game show Dread Zone in the shadow sector of the Solana galaxy, Ratchet, Clank and Big Al have returned to the Starship Phoenix to resume their duties. The Phoenix had been messed up pretty badly by their kidnappers, but it got fixed while they were being forced to compete in Dread Zone. Ratchet is still the ship's captain, and he and Clank wait to receive errands from the mayor of Metropolis, Sasha Fyronix. There's currently peace throughout the galaxy, but minor incidents do occur every now and then. While relaxing, Ratchet and Clank receive a transmission from Sasha, requesting them to help Skid McMarx on planet Iridia, who isn't exactly good at defending himself. They head off to go on the mission, but are stopped by Helga, who says they're not going anywhere without basic training. That includes combat and maneuvering with the swing shot, which Helga gives Ratchet, given that it's perhaps the most used gadget in the galaxy, maybe even universe. The first level is thus an obstacle course, akin to the one in Up Your Arsenal, and I guess you could say the first real level is Iridia. Of course, you're allowed to explore the Starship Phoenix before heading there, and it's mostly the same as it was in Up Your Arsenal, but now you have the option to interact with your squad mates, getting new conversation options depending on your progress. Ratchet and Clank return to the Phoenix after helping out Skid on Iridia. They immediately receive another errand from Sasha, who tells them that they need to go to Blackwater City on planet Rilgar to help the Galactic Rangers. Before they go though, Skid gives Ratchet a brand new C6000 hoverboard, since Blackwater City is a hub for hoverboarding activities. Skid claims that Ratchet doesn't even need new grind boots, since this hoverboard is able to grind on rails. That's right, I'm keeping that idea, and it can also be used on regular terrain for faster traversal, like in Jak 2. I call it C6000 since it's a new addition that allows for such use. Whether it's a direct successor to the C3000 or maybe to a C5000 is up to you. The story might seem aimless so far, and it is, but I thought it would be a fitting way to start the game, as it kind of works as a tutorial, and it seems appropriate given Ratchet's position. However, the next transmission Ratchet and Clank receive from Sasha is a bit more pressing. This one is about Thugs for Less members that have apparently been spotted on the Thran asteroids. Ratchet and Clank are surprised to hear the news, for one because they thought the mercenary group had disbanded after Ratchet and Clank defeated their leader, and secondly, the Thugs for Less reside in the Bogon Galaxy, not Solana. Since Ratchet and Clank have experience dealing with them, they're prime candidates to investigate the matter. Sasha also tells them to bring Captain Quark along, both because he once worked with the Thugs, and because Thran asteroids used to be his hiding place. However, Quark is on vacation in the Joe Y resort on Pokitaru, and since he's declared radio silence, Ratchet and Clank need to pick him up from there. They find Quark getting tanned in a sunbed, and there are others relaxing there as well, such as another green figure in the background, who Ratchet and Clank would recognize, but they don't notice him. Before they tell Quark about the mission, they head back to the Phoenix, as the information is confidential, so they wouldn't want anyone to eavesdrop. After Quark hears the news, he agrees to go with them, but he begs Ratchet and Clank to do something for him first. He asks them to infiltrate his old headquarters on planet Umbris to retrieve a precious item that has been in the making for 2 years. Since that's how long it's been since Quark was there last, he doesn't remember the security codes, but as luck would have it, Big Al has a trespasser gadget that Ratchet can use to infiltrate the base. Normally, a hacker would be able to unlock doors throughout the Solana galaxy, but since Umbris' security systems haven't been updated, only the trespasser will work. It might also grant passage to areas that hide treasures like gold bolts. Ratchet and Clank infiltrate the base and eventually find what they're after. However, a robot is guarding the package that they're supposed to retrieve, so they have to fight it first. This robot resembles a Quark bot, but is far stronger, so it's the first boss fight of the game. They eventually destroy the Quark bot and grab the package. They don't know what's inside, since Quark only told them to look for a package, and they don't dare open it. After all, they assume it might be a crotchetizer or some other gross item. Once they're back on the Phoenix, Quark quickly slaps the package out of Clank's hands, and removes the packaging to reveal a vidcomic, which Quark inserts into the VG9000 game system and begins to play. Ratchet and Clank are annoyed by the fact that they spent so long to retrieve a stupid game for Quark. The player might feel this too, especially after having done some fetch quests, but the vidcomic will serve the story. It portrays Quark as a flawless hero, boosting Quark's ego and self-esteem greatly, which is just what he needed before going on a new mission. The vidcomic is playable, but it's not mandatory. Ratchet and Clank, along with Quark, travel to the Thran asteroids, and while they're looking for thugs, Ratchet and Clank bring up unpleasant memories related to Quark, to which Quark responds by nervously laughing and quietly apologizing. They eventually stumble upon some thugs sitting by a campfire, and they listen in on their conversation. They mostly ramble on and argue with one another, so Clank makes the observation that they don't seem to function very well without their leader. The thugs eventually get past all their bickering and start talking about plans, but just before they reveal anything, Ratchet, Clank and Quark are caught from behind. They're thrown aboard a ship that's headed for the Bogon Galaxy. They're sent to the thought-to-be abandoned space station in the Felsen system, where they're forced to fight for their lives in an arena. There's only been a space combat section in the Felsen system, so I thought it would be interesting to use the space station there for ground combat. They survive, but are then thrown into detainment cells. The thugs would have sent them to the flying lab on planet Aranos if they still had control over it. Clank tells Ratchet and Quark that there doesn't seem to be any form of escape, especially since he and the female infobot broke up, so she won't help him out of prisons anymore, unfortunately. She's completely forgotten after going commando, but I thought she deserved a mention, and I think this would be a good explanation for her absence in later games, even though we never see the breakup. Ratchet, Clank and Quark are eventually rescued by someone wearing a mask. The rescuer hesitates to bring Quark along after all the crimes he committed in the Bogon Galaxy, but Clank claims he's on their side. That's hard for the rescuer to believe, but since they're short on time, the rescuer goes along with it. While they escape the space station by ship, Ratchet asks who the masked rescuer is. It turns out to be Angela Cross, who does have a habit of keeping her identity hidden. Clank asks her how she found them, to which she responds that they were being broadcasted on live holovision while competing in the arena. That does raise questions, which Clank tries to make sense of. Ratchet asks Angela where they're heading, and she tells him that she's taking them to the Bogon Galaxy's own rendition of the Starship Phoenix called the Starship Mega. Angela introduces them to the Mega, which is, as its name suggests, property of Megacorp and has been entrusted to her by Abercrombie Fizzwidget, sort of akin to how she used to own the flying lab on planet Aranos, but the Mega is way smaller in comparison and situated in space. Ratchet, Clank, and Quark explore the ship for a bit, until Quark gets his eye on a VG-9400, which is the VG brand's newest console. I dub it 9400 specifically, since a VG-9800 gets mentioned in A Crack in Time, and I assume the number jumps by 200 every time, so that Up Your Arsenal has 9000, Deadlocked would have 9200, and Tools of Destruction would have 9600. There's even a Captain Quark vidcomic to go along with it, which Quark excitedly tries out, only to find that it retells Quark's testing years at Megacorp, where the goal is to hurt and embarrass him. If you've seen my third R&C dub, then you might remember that Yellow Guy, aka Big Al, designed a similar game, so it's a fun fact that I transferred that idea from this story to that dub. Playing this vidcomic brings back painful memories, so Quark dramatically rushes out to the hangar to return to the Starship Phoenix, so he can play his own confidence-boosting vidcomic, but he's stopped by Ratchet and Clank. Clank tells Quark that he should instead repent for what he did in the Bogon Galaxy, and apologize to everyone on the ship. Quark reluctantly agrees and moves towards Angela's quarters so he can apologize to her first. As soon as Quark leaves, Ratchet asks Clank if he wants to play the vidcomic for the fun of it. This vidcomic is also playable and optional. Quark's transgressions in the Solana Galaxy got ignored in Up Your Arsenal, for comedic effect of course, and it was indeed effective, but I thought his transgressions in the Bogon Galaxy should be addressed, since he's never been a hero in that galaxy, so Angela Cross and other Bogonites wouldn't just forget how his plans almost caused a galaxy-wide genocide. It also forces Quark to grow, which I think builds well on his already great character arc from the original trilogy. The new vidcomics may be optional, but their very existence has great plot relevance. Quark enters Angela's quarters with his eyes closed while he tries to apologize, but he's immediately held up to a wall, being questioned by her. Apparently, Angela's helixomorph, the device that could shrink and enlarge protopets, is missing, and she accuses Quark of stealing it, just as he entered the ship. Ratchet and Clank enter her office to find out what all the ruckus is about. Angela informs them of her suspicions, and while arguments could be made for why he would do that, they don't think he did. Clank suggests that maybe some thugs stole it while Angela was rescuing them, in a plan to lure her away from the ship. Her anger almost blinds her to that possibility, but she decides to check the security cameras. There doesn't appear to be any thugs, but it seems Blarg stole it instead, which is even more suspicious, given the fact that they reside in the Solana Galaxy, and may be in league with the thugs. Angela reluctantly apologizes to Quark for acting on impulse, but she doesn't fully trust him yet. Quark's atonement has a long way to go. Ratchet and Clank believe that the helixomorph will be taken directly to the Blarg's home planet, Orxon, so they fly there. Angela stays in the Bogon Galaxy to investigate on her turf, and Quark stays on the Starship Mega to continue his atonement with the Bogonites. Ratchet and Clank arrive on Orxon, but after exploring the place for a bit, they find out that neither their trespasser nor their hacker works on a particular lock, so they need to find a gadget that does. Clank recalls the Blarg Tactical Research Station on Nebula G34, so they inspect that place to see if they can find a compatible hacking device. Indeed they do, and they manage to reach it using the regular hacker, so that was an oversight on the Blarg's part. They return to Orxon after retrieving it. Ratchet and Clank infiltrate the Blarg's home base on Orxon using the new hacking device. They don't find the helixomorph, but they do find a computer seemingly detailing the Blarg's plans. Blargs would be stupid enough to let something like that slip, just like they were stupid enough to not even update their security system on the Blarg Tactical Research Station, despite having made a new hacking device. However, to Ratchet and Clank's misfortune, neither of them understand Blargian. But wait, couldn't Ratchet read the Blargian manual for the levitator in Going Commando? As I interpreted it, Ratchet didn't actually understand the language when he equipped Clank with the levitator. I think he just figured out how to do it by looking at the illustrations. Speaking of which, they do find an illustration of an ultramech pad, the type that Clank uses to enlarge and reduce himself with. They recall there being one of those on planet Quartu, so they travel there to gather information. Upon their arrival, they notice that the ultramech pad is completely gone, but the scientist who built it is still there. He tells them that some Tyrannoids dismantled it and carried it away. He doesn't know why they did it though, nor where they went with it, and he didn't dare ask them. It seems the Blargs and Tyrannoids are working together, maybe even the thugs. Either way, the Tyrannoids' home planet Tyrannosis is the next destination. Before leaving, however, Clank wants to visit his mother, since she's in the area, and since Ratchet wouldn't want to interfere with that reunion, he goes on without Clank for a bit. While on his way to Tyrannosis, Ratchet suddenly realizes he'll need a Tyrageist to both infiltrate and understand the Tyrannoids, so he contacts Big Al to hear if he's got that gadget. Unfortunately, he doesn't, and to rub salt on the wound, Gadgetron apparently discontinued its production very recently. Big Al says there might still be one in the Gadgetron Museum on Calibo 3 though, as that's where he got the old Trespasser from. Ratchet inspects the museum and eventually finds the Tyrageist, meaning he can now head straight to the Demon Slayer. It's also possible to find a Ratchet and Clank vidcomic, which is kind of similar to Going Mobile, and this one's also optional to play, but doesn't really affect the story, unlike the Quark vidcomics. Meanwhile, Clank enters the Quartu factory to visit his mother, who he hasn't seen in years. He apologizes to her for that fact, but his mother knows he has great responsibilities, and is just happy to see him again. They chat about all sorts of things, and there's extra optional dialogue, similar to the Iris supercomputer from Tools of Destruction, though Clank's mom doesn't come with a voice. There's even more bonus dialogue if you revisit her with Ratchet too. After Clank is done talking, he slides down the long pipe and jumps into one of the ships installed there, exactly like in the first game, only this time he's not being chased, and he's headed to Tyrannosis instead of Veldon. On Tyrannosis, Ratchet manages to get past all the guards and joins a meeting between Tyrannoids, and because Ratchet is wearing the Tyrageist, he's able to understand what they're saying. They reveal that the Ultramech pads, as well as the Helixomorph, have been sent to the thugs for less, which confirms their involvement. After the meeting, Ratchet returns to his ship, where he finds Clank. While they fly to the starship Mega, Ratchet tells Clank what he overheard. Clank suspects that they're all working together to get revenge on Ratchet and Clank. The Blargs, Thugs, and Tyrannoids were the main enemy factions of the first 3 games after all. Back at the Mega in the Bogon Galaxy, they inform Angela of everything they've gathered. Ratchet and Clank are about to visit the Thugs' main base on their home planet Snivelak, but before they go, they ask Quark to come along due to his former involvement with the Thugs. They find Quark playing the humiliating vidcomic of him, and seeing his mistakes fills him with regret. He also hasn't been very successful in making amends with the Bogonites on the ship, so while he's depressed, he does want to go with Ratchet and Clank, to get a break from all this hardship. Clank tells Quark that proving his worth through actions instead of words could potentially make for a more efficient atonement. Ratchet, Clank, and Quark get to the Thug HQ on planet Snivelak, and fortunately for them, the place has locks that are compatible with the new hacking gadget. When they enter the main room, they're caught, and to their surprise, they find out that the Thug leader has been alive all along, which explains how the mercenary group survived as well. He didn't leave the battlefield unscathed, however, being paralyzed from the waist down, so he's sitting in a wheelchair, a floating one at that, similar to Crew from Jak 2. Ratchet asks him where the Helixomorph and Ultramech pads are, but the Thug leader obviously won't say. However, a Thug member suddenly enters the room to tell his boss that those things are ready to be shipped to Gadgetron, which enrages the Thug leader greatly. It comes as a shock, but Ratchet, Clank, and Quark now realize that Gadgetron must have hired not just the Thugs, but the Blargs, and the Tyrannoids too. The Thugs obviously can't let them escape knowing that, so they try to catch Ratchet, Clank, and Quark. Unfortunately, there was too much resistance to retrieve the Helixomorph and Ultramech pads, but they luckily managed to leave the planet. That is except for Quark, who was unknowingly left behind, and the Thugs send him to Gadgetron, along with the other stuff. Ratchet and Clank reach space, but Thug ships are in hot pursuit of them. Ratchet tries to fend them off, but they're overwhelmed and eventually shot down, luckily over a moon. As usual, the crash doesn't injure them much at all, but they're not able to contact anyone, so their best bet is to fix their ship, so they can tell Angela about what they've uncovered. They suddenly see a familiar face, that being the Mystic from Going Commando, who's apparently collecting fuel from ships that crash land on this moon, which has been happening a lot lately, due to the Thugs for Less's revival. If you give the Mystic enough fuel, he'll fix your ship, and if you give him more, you'll receive a bunch of bolts. What the Mystic does with the fuel is anyone's guess. The moon is spherical like the jamming array in Going Commando and the Obani moons from Up Your Arsenal, but it's bigger, so finding the shipwrecks will offer some challenge. While collecting ship parts, ships may crash land, offering more parts, but best not be hit by them. After having collected enough parts, Ratchet & Clank depart for the starship Mega to tell Angela the news. She says it's a shame about Quark, but that they don't have time to worry about him right now. What's important now is to get support from Megacorp, and to hopefully convince those who support Gadgetron to also join their side. While Angela reaches out to her boss Fizzwidget on planet Yeedle, Ratchet & Clank visits Sasha in Metropolis on planet Kerwan. They tell her about their discoveries, and she agrees to support them against Gadgetron, and to try convincing the galactic authorities to join their cause. They're unfortunately not successful in doing that, since the authorities not only trust Gadgetron, but rely on their technology. Ratchet contacts Angela, and she says she wasn't successful in convincing Fizzwidget either. It is true that Gadgetron and Megacorp are rivals, but Fizzwidget doubts that Wendell Lumos, who's the head of Gadgetron, would commit such heinous acts, especially after their formal treaty of agreeing to occupy separate galaxies. This treaty isn't canonical, but it's something I've made up to show how the company's relationship has improved, preventing them from clashing, like we've seen on planet Barlow, where Megacorp took over Gadgetron's turf. Fizzwidget is also thinking that accusing Gadgetron of something that might not be true would be a great risk for their healthy relationship. It seems they will need stronger evidence before being able to convince the big guns to join them. For now, they at least have Sasha, the Q-Force, and the Galactic Rangers by their side. Meanwhile, Quark is imprisoned at Gadgetron's headquarters on Kalibo 3, and is met by someone he hasn't seen before. It turns out to be the head of Gadgetron, but it isn't Lumos. The new CEO tries to get Quark to join his side, manipulating him by saying that his supposed friends left him behind. He also plays on Quark's failure as a hero, how he's shunned by everyone, and promises to give Quark whatever he wants, including protection. Quark experiences many conflicting feelings, so he has to reflect on it. The CEO goes to see the Thug Leader and asks him if he really did neutralize Ratchet & Clank. The Thug Leader claims that he did, but the CEO has his doubts. If they turn out to be alive, then the CEO will eliminate the Thug Leader, which strikes fear in his heart. The Thug Leader decides to go out on his own to check if they're actually dead, just in case. Meanwhile, on Ratchet & Clank's side, they go to Kalibo 3 to investigate, but on their way there, they are intercepted by a large ship, altering their course. They try to attack the ship, but their ship's lasers aren't strong enough, so they try to outrun the ship, but it manages to keep up. Ratchet decides to fly towards Veldon, which is luckily nearby. They eventually reach Veldon, and Ratchet flies to a deserted area so that no civilians will be hurt in the dogfight. He challenges the other ship's pilot to evade mountains, and eventually the large ship crashes into one of them. Ratchet lands his ship beside the crash site, where he and Clank search for the pilot. It appears to be the Thug Leader, who didn't get too injured, as he already can't feel his legs. They engage in a ground fight, the Thug Leader's wheelchair being plenty equipped with lethal weapons, so his boss fight is also similar to Cruz from Jak 2. Ratchet & Clank defeat the Thug Leader, and he pleads for his life, saying he's only trying to kill them in order to not be killed himself. Clank suggests that he joins their side, which both Ratchet and the Thug Leader find crazy, but they hesitantly accept the proposal. The Thug Leader doesn't even like his employer, so he tells them what he knows about it. The CEO of Gadgetron got the Blargs, Tyrannoids, and Thugs for Less on their side by supplying them with weapons and uniting them under their common hatred for Ratchet & Clank, given their history. The CEO's plan is to combine Helixomorph and Ultramech Pad technology to create a device that can both enlarge and reduce the size of both biological entities and non-biological ones. The Thug Leader doesn't know any more than that, but at least Ratchet & Clank know what the CEO is capable of now. Now that the Thug Leader is on their side, Ratchet & Clank are allowed to enter the Thugs for Less arena in the Felsen system at will. More optional challenges await them there. Ratchet & Clank, along with the Thug Leader, go to the Phoenix, where they contact Sasha and Angela to discuss whether the Thug Leader can be used as evidence. They reach the conclusion that probably no one will believe him, and that using a criminal as testimony will reflect badly on them, so they instead tell him to help them infiltrate Gadgetron's headquarters to gather evidence there. Sasha and Angela agree to meet up on the Phoenix, so they can all travel to Kalibo 3 together. On Kalibo 3, Sasha and the Q-Force keep guard at a fair distance from the headquarters, while the thug leader helps Ratchet, Clank, and Angela infiltrate the building. Before they enter the main office, the thug leader suggests staying behind, so that the CEO won't know he switched sides, partly because the thug leader is scared of the CEO witnessing his betrayal. Some Galactic Rangers keep watch over him while Ratchet, Clank, and Angela enter the main office. They see the new CEO, and Angela actually recognizes him from when Lumos and Fizzwidget signed the treaty to keep their corporations in separate galaxies, and recalls that he gave anyone involved with Megacorp a spiteful look, but Angela didn't think much of it back then. This is where I put the line, "His name is Gregory," which I remember really cracked me up when I revisited an early draft of this story after not having read it in a while. That's not just because it's such a nonchalant reveal of such a non-intimidating name for a villain, but also because I used the name Gregory for Ratchet in my second R&C dub. Due to how funny it is, I never changed the name. Angela asks Gregory why he has been doing all of this, and why he gave her such a mean look the first time they met. Surely there must be some sort of reasoning behind it all. Gregory tells them that he used to be a regular, but devout employee at Gadgetron. He actually worked in the Bogon Galaxy, on planet Barlow to be exact, which is also his home planet. You might deduce where this is going. Unfortunately for Gregory and many other hard-working Gadgetron employees, they lost their jobs when Megacorp took over. Gregory wept as the Gadgetron buildings were demolished one by one, and replaced with what he sees as inferior buildings. From that day forward, he swore to rise up the ranks in Gadgetron to get revenge on Megacorp. He claims that he eventually climbed so high up that Lumos decided to hand the company over to him. I think this idea for a villain is really interesting, since it builds on details from prior games, so while we've never met Gregory before, the idea of him doesn't come out of nowhere. It shows the consequences from Megacorp taking over the Bogon Galaxy, on planet Barlow specifically, and gives Gregory some well-defined motivation all the same, since who wouldn't want revenge for getting their job stolen? I also think it's a cool reversal to have Gadgetron as a villain after Megacorp was portrayed to be the villain in Going Commando. I'm not quite sure what species Gregory should be. We've only seen Vukovar tribesmen on Barlow, discounting their Soar Beasts and the Gadgetron puppies, but other creatures surely exist on that planet, so I could make a new species. That being said, I think it would be a bit fitting for him to be the same species as the Vukovar tribesmen, considering the description for them says that Megacorp dislikes them. Now, this story isn't really about Megacorp disliking Gregory, it's the reverse in fact, but hey, it could be even stronger grounds for his hatred of Megacorp, who have not only mistreated Gadgetron employees, but them in particular. Ratchet, Clank, and Angela don't buy that Lumos gave the company over to him. After all, it was never publicly announced, so he must be lying. Besides, Lumos wouldn't hand the company over to someone who would defile it with shady dealings. Gregory retorts that they're one to talk, after ruining so many lives and landscapes. Heck, Megacorp nearly destroyed itself. Angela says that wasn't the blame of the company, but Gregory again retorts that they must be a bad company for letting that happen in the first place, especially since Quark is a total goof. Gregory would know, because unlike Megacorp, Gregory gained control over Quark, and this is where Quark enters the room. It is true that Megacorp gained control of Quark and made him a test subject, but what Gregory means is that he convinced Quark to actually join his side. Ratchet and Clank ask if it's true that he's betrayed them yet again, after all that development and attempting to atone. Quark looks conflicted at first, but then he notices something in the background, and suddenly turns full sellout. He tells them that he fully endorses Gregory, which pisses off Ratchet, Clank, and Angela immensely. Despite how angry they are, they try to keep their cool, and Angela asks Gregory why he stole her Helixamorph. Gregory explains that he's been combining its technology with Ultramech Pad technology to create a device that won't just be able to alter the size of biological beings, but non-living things as well. What he aims to do now is shrink down every Megacorp building and replace them with miniature Gadgetron buildings he's built that he will expand upon dropping them, completely crushing the shrunk Megacorp buildings. I got this idea from the Phineas and Ferb episode named Not Phineas and Ferb, where Doofenshmirtz uses a shrinkinator ray to minimize famous works of architecture to add to his collection. It's pretty handy for Gregory and Gadgetron, as they can easily manufacture miniatures of factories that are supposed to be gigantic. Having finished revealing his entire plan, Lumos suddenly enters the fray. Gregory is very surprised that he's back from his vacation already. Now Ratchet, Clank, Angela, and Quark know for sure that Lumos hasn't handed the company over to Gregory. Lumos explains that he let Gregory handle the company for a month while Lumos took a vacation in the Joe Y resort on planet Pokitaru, so he was the green guy that Ratchet and Clank didn't notice in the background of where Quark was relaxing. Lumos had only been on vacation for a little over 2 weeks, so it's peculiar that he showed up right now, but Gregory doesn't interrogate him. Lumos tells Gregory that this has to stop right now, but although Gregory highly respects his boss, he denies, and orders his thug guards to take his boss into custody, which disappoints Lumos severely. Gregory is about to get rid of Ratchet, Clank, and Angela, but right before he does, Fizzwidget suddenly steps in. Ratchet, Clank, Angela, and Gregory have absolutely no idea why he's here all of a sudden, but Fizzwidget tells them that the broadcast was proof enough to confirm all suspicions. They look behind themselves and faintly notice a camera, with the thug leader sitting behind it, which is a callback to the thugs broadcasting Ratchet, Clank, and Quark competing in the Felsen system arena. The Gadgetron headquarters are soon stormed by ships belonging to Megacorp and the Galactic authorities. Ratchet, Clank, Angela, and Gregory then realize that Quark was only acting, using his infamy in Bogon and endorsement of Gregory to bait the big guns to take action. Gregory is currently freaking out, being caught red-handed by basically everyone with power. He doesn't give up, however, and uses his newly built device to shrink down everyone while fleeing the scene. Everyone is now super tiny, but they have to catch up with Gregory. Fizzwidget grants Ratchet and Clank his fastest ship, which is how he got to the Gadgetron headquarters faster than most others. Even though it's shrunk, it should be able to catch up with Gregory, so they chase him while he seemingly heads for his home planet, Barlow. Some others also fly towards Barlow, but others situate themselves in other part of the Bogon galaxy where Megacorp is prominent, like Dabo, Todano, and especially Yeadle, which is where Angela, Fizzwidget, and Quark are heading. Gregory reaches Barlow and is about to replace a Megacorp building, but Ratchet and Clank catch up just as he's about to do that. Unfortunately, they're too small to deal any substantial damage. They won't be able to fight back unless they turn bigger. Realizing that they can't do anything in this situation, they let Gregory shrink down a Megacorp building and decide to fly nearby the Gadgetron building he's dropping so that they may also get enhanced by the size-altering device. At the cost of a Megacorp factory, it works, and Gregory finally notices them, so he flees, this time heading towards Yeadle to take out the main factory. Ratchet and Clank's ship is faster than Gregory's, but Gregory's is better equipped. He also enlarges his ship to make it faster, and tries shrinking Ratchet and Clank's ship. He eventually destroys their ship, but Ratchet and Clank manage to eject themselves onto Gregory's ship. Since it's so big, it takes a while until they reach Gregory, so the ship becomes a whole level. When they catch up to him, they're already on planet Yeadle, and the others who positioned themselves there begin attacking Gregory's ship, which wouldn't do much individually, but as a group, they manage to damage it. Gregory grabs the miniature Gadgetron factories, equips an armor that can fly, and turns himself even bigger, but just as he does that, Ratchet throws Clank at him, turning him into Giant Clank. After having fought for a while, Gregory still has the upper hand, until he suddenly can't control himself. He suddenly turns everyone to their normal sizes, but not Quark, since he's controlling Gregory's brain from inside his head. Quark remarks that it's just like playing vidcomics, and he makes Gregory turn off his armor's functionalities, making him drop. Quark makes Gregory throw his Gadgetron miniatures in the air while enlarging them, just as Quark jumps out of Gregory's head, which also enlarges Quark. Quark manages to take the size-altering device out of Gregory's hands, just before Gregory is crushed beneath the numerous Gadgetron factories, and Quark gets saved by Giant Clank. I had taken some complicated creative liberties before this point, but this sequence in particular turned out ridiculously wild, and I bet it would be extremely complicated to gamify. A good amount of people witnessed Quark's heroic act, so they conclude that he might not be so bad after all. He still has to explain himself though. Despite his earlier treatment of them, Quark is thanked by both Fizzwidget and Angela for saving Megacorp. Ratchet and Clank are also thanked, of course, along with everyone else who assisted in stopping Gregory. Lumos is released from captivity and resumes his position as CEO of Gadgetron, but creates a stronger succession plan, evaluating his employees thoroughly to try and find someone far more trustworthy, who isn't likely to seek vengeance against Megacorp or corrupt Gadgetron in any other way. Ratchet and Clank resign as captains of the Starship Phoenix and give the position to Big Al. They want to relax a bit and live in Metropolis on planet Kurwan, partly so that Ratchet can be closer to Sasha, as they do seem to have a thing going. The thug leader, despite having done good deeds to redeem himself, accepts being taken prisoner for a while. Some other thugs for less members get jail time too, but remaining thugs take refuge in another galaxy to avoid that, the Polaris Galaxy to be precise. Angela also travels to the Polaris Galaxy, but for unknown reasons. Angela Cross is who I was referring to during the introduction of this video as the character that's difficult to determine how she fits in the lore, because I don't know the timing of her meeting Max Apogee and fleeing with him, but I'll just roll with what I've written for her. About a year later in the Polaris Galaxy, Percival Tachyon, who's searching for Angela Cross and Max Apogee, gets word that there's another Lombax in the Solana Galaxy, on Metropolis to be exact. Tachyon therefore departs for planet Kurwan to find this Lombax. Dr. Nefarious and Lawrence are still sitting on an asteroid, and Tachyon's fleet zooms past them. Nefarious tries to shout for help, but they're completely ignored, pissing him off. Shortly after that, however, Lawrence tells him that a planet named Quantos is almost within range, Quantos being where they crash land. Dr. Nefarious begins victoriously laughing so hard that he plays another Lance and Janice soap opera. The end. That last scene is of course a similar ending to Deadlocked, and every event in that epilogue bridges the gap between that game and the future series. I'm glad to have finally shared my Ratchet & Clank fanfiction set between Deadlocked and Tools of Destruction. You could wonder why I would even share it, in case I want to save it for a fan project, but I doubt I'll get into another one, and if I do, then I guess this is a pitch of sorts. I doubt this'll happen, but I wouldn't really mind if someone else used this story for their own fan project. In fact, it would be really cool to see it in action. It might need some revisions though to work better, especially considering the constraints of developing fan games. On that note, what did you all think of this story? Any feedback is appreciated, and I might improve the story by taking in some criticisms. With that, Ratchet & Clank Month 2021 has come to an end. I hope you all enjoyed it. I plan to do another R&C month next year, so while it might take a while, I hope you look forward to it with patience. Of course, I will release other videos before then. I'm Arcadon, and hopefully, you'll see me next time!